A lot of us make that mistake of, because, you go with the hype, yeah? I've got to be living in Kileleshwa, that's where life is, that's where my peers are, Okay, the challenges and one of the biggest mistakes I've seen many people making in the journey. One is being emotive. A home is very emotive. And we've got this thing of, you see this home and you're like, wow, this is the home I want, yeah? So we go more with the heart more than the head. And what happens if you go in with the heart, then you're likely to make the wrong decision. Because one, you're likely to buy a house that's beyond your means. Then two, you're likely not to take time to do all the due diligence. Because then you go with the heart and this is what I love, I have to get this, it's this or I die, So it's very important to be very sober at that point and ask yourself, where am I in my life stage? What are the other expenses that I have? What can I afford? Normally, as a rule of thumb, you shouldn't get a house where your mortgage is more than 30% of your gross income. The same way I normally advise, if you are not going to get a mortgage and you decide to rent, immediately you find yourself paying rent 30%, more than 30%. In fact, for rent, it should be 20%. Because the unfortunate thing with rent is that even if you stayed in a house for 30 years, you can never tell the landlord, I have stayed in this house for 30 years, so give me the kitchen. The day he kicks you out, he kicks you out, yeah? A lot of us make that mistake of, because, you go with the hype, yeah? I've got to be living in Kileleshwa, that's where life is, that's where my peers are, And especially with the young, with the generation, I would call them the Generation Y and Generation Z, yeah? And some of us also, yeah? We get lost in that hype and we forget about the realist. Is it sustainable in the long term? Then you find yourself in debt, you find yourself in a chain of debt. Then you're always frustrated. And yes, and that's how people end up even losing their homes, because even when you got into it, it was not realistic. So it's always good. Start small. I see people moving from Buruburu, they move to South Sea. From South Sea, they go to Kileleshwa. From Kileleshwa, they go to Runda. That's how life is, As you move in different stages of your life, you continue graduating. Because if you wait for that big dream, either you'll make a big mistake or you will not start. And the long journey of owning a home starts with that first step. So if Syokimau is where I can afford, then that is where I'll start with. If I cannot afford to buy that ready-made house, then let me start with a plot for 300,000 shillings. Then let me start building slowly. Or get to a bank, come to KCB, we'll give you a construction loan. Put up a 1 million house, a 2 million house. It's very, very possible. There are people who've done that. So it's got to be realistic. And the other thing, of course, is lack of due diligence. And that's where a lot of Kenyans have been conned. Because you rush in, sign in between the lines, put in money without doing a proper due diligence. It's important. Sometimes people think it's cheaper to go without using a lawyer, but I always advise that's why they're there. Use a lawyer, let them do the due diligence, let them do the searches, let them do the undertakings on your behalf, yeah? So that even if you're buying that off plan, you have a tight agreement that covers you as a buyer, yeah? The trend is actually changing. In the 90s, in the 80s, the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, it was the 40-year-olds and the 30-year-olds and the even 50-year-olds who used to buy homes. But the young now are embracing the idea of owning a house, and and it's becoming with more units being put up in the country, though we are still running on a short. More people want to own. I mean, everybody. There's nobody who doesn't want to own their own house. The only challenge is affordability, and that's the biggest challenge. Then it's worsened by the fact that we don't have many developers who are putting houses that the young people can afford, what I would call the lower and the middle segment. So you find the houses that are being put up are in the upper segment. The houses are in Kileleshwa, Kilimani, 15 million, which is beyond the reach of majority of the young people. But we've seen with the Big Four agenda, with affordable housing becoming very critical, there are a lot of developers who are embracing that, and there are units that are coming up for 3 million, 4 million. Some of the units are even less than 3 million, and that's where I would advise the young to start. But they will have to have that spirit of, I can start small and graduate and grow as I grow. Because today, even when you get into employment, when I got into employment, my salary was very little. It was almost like a three-digit figure, yeah. But it's grown like that, yeah. So you grow as you do not want to just make that big kill at once. So my advice to the young is start saving early. It's normally what I see with the most young people is that, you know, the first job you get, you want to have a nice ride, a nice car. In fact, most of the young people, you find they're driving bigger cars than even people who can afford to buy houses. So it's about having our priority right, yeah. A car, first of all, is not an asset. It's a liability, because immediately it gets out of the showroom or the car yard, the value starts going down. On top of that, you have to service it, you have to fuel it, yeah. But if you put that 300,000 in a plot, in 1 year, that plot will have appreciated. Land will always appreciate, yeah. So it's just about having your priorities right, even from the time you're young, because you don't need to turn 40 and you're still in your mommy's or daddy's house, yeah.